Welcome back to season 1, episode 47 of the 706 podcast, where we discuss, debate, and argue with Tony about what movies are good or not. Today we are discussing 1945 or 46's Leave Her to Heaven, a sort of film noir, although we may have problems with that label, movie about a sort of young man who marries a sort of beautiful femme fatale, only to realize, of course, that her behavior is a bit more different than he may have imagined to begin with. So I had picked this movie. I think Connor selected it, if I remember right. So, let's go around and introduce ourselves, since I always forget that part, and then we'll get some quick snapshot opinions.
Hello, everyone. My name is Connor.
Hi, guys. I'm Tony. I hope you've enjoyed our Borat 2 episode.
Yes. Hello. This is Kirk. I must say it's nice to be in the company of these three fine gentlemen. Without them repeatedly talking, Tony, I got stop the count text messages all week. Connor, he's on about waterproofing on some of these ballots, like watermarks. And Anthony, I mean, it's really like any more James Woods retweets, Anthony, I'm out.
Kirk, I was tweeting stop the count, and then I tweeted you keep counting. I was very confused. I couldn't quite figure it out.
I couldn't tell what state you were talking about, so maybe that was my bad.
But whatever they did was wrong. I don't know whether they didn't count enough or counted too many, but it was wrong, whatever it was.
Well, on that note. All right, so let's go around. Quick snapshot of opinions. Let's do Connor first, since he picked this one.
Well, Anthony, from the very first minute that I saw this, as I was watching this movie, I knew it was an Anthony movie. The very first scene just immediately draws me in, and I was captivated for sure. I mean, there's something about this movie that's, at the end of the day, feels kind of like maybe noir, certainly a melodrama.
Mm-hmm.
The first half of the movie is suffused with this incredibly eerie vibe, which is helped by its visuals, which are very distinct. There's this uncanniness, too, of a movie from, the mid-40s, in color. Obviously, right, we know of movies in color from throughout that decade, right? And we could think of The Wizard of Oz, for example, as being an early, big color film. But, just this movie in particular, just the 40s style of cinematography mixed with this bright, lurid color, there's just this eeriness, there's this unsettlingness, and there's also on the level of plot, which I'm sure we'll get into, kind of how weird this femme fatale character is, Ellen. By the time it gets to around the halfway point we have in our first kind of evil act committed by Ellen, it loses momentum, I found, with the exception maybe of the court scene. I found ultimately Ellen to be a very uninteresting villain, whereas she is kind of implied to be. There's so many hints dropped as to kind of maybe a more eerie reality that has yet to be uncovered. But as it turns out, she is kind of the standard femme fatale, and the standard femme fatale is interesting, and I guess she's an interesting example of it in that, right, clearly there's some amount of social commentary, right, that the issues that kind of make her into a villain, so to speak, are kind of the social norms of the time, right? But the movie so clearly takes society's side on all these issues, and it doesn't really succeed in illuminating any of these issues beyond merely name dropping them. So while I'm sympathetic to that social reading, and I can see how there's so many avenues of entry, and I can see why someone like Anthony, who has a kind of literary interests, could pick apart so many things in this movie and find much to talk about, I just felt that as a work of art that's trying to deal with these issues, it just didn't really work for me in the end.
Interesting. So not since Simon Killer has Connor been so wrong on so many different points, but we'll get to that. So, the opening scene is my least favorite scene in the film, but no. Okay. Interesting. So we'll move on. I'll go more to some of those points later. I'm going to let Kirk...
True? Do you not like the first scene? I'm just curious.
No, it's an okay scene. And I got to say, there's one thing that's really interesting about that opening part, though, since you brought it up, is the Native American imagery that's in the background when they get off the train is the most fascinating part about that.
Sorry,
and it ties in so much to the movie.
I'm sorry, Anthony. When I said opening scene, I should not have said opening scene. We have a prologue. We have a prologue and epilogue,
okay.
bookended. I meant the first kind of within
The book.
the meeting of our two of our protagonist and antagonist of the couple. It struck an Anthony chord for me.
That's where the Native American imagery was coming.
Exactly. No, okay, so I'm going to do something different.
Goodness.
I'm going to let Kirk decide if he wants to go next or last.
Well, I know Tony's going to sing the praises of this film. So I'm wondering if I should counterbalance that preemptively or if I should rebut everything he says. And
well, Kirk, he has 2 notes. He goes off
I
what
wrote
you
a
want.
lot of notes
do,
for
so.
this. Yeah.
He has the good notes and the bad
he's
notes.
Feel stupid. Okay, you go first, Tony, so then I can act like
No,
I can.
they're not that good. Literally one of my first notes.
I think it's more interesting, Kirk, if you go ahead, because you're
Okay.
trying to anticipate his reaction.
No, I want to hear. I want you to do it, anticipating my reaction. That's good.
Oh
Yeah.
no!
No, do it. Do it.
No, I think this is a fine film. Actually, maybe a little more than fine. I'm not sure. I need to chew on this film a little bit longer. You know, I think, as Connor said, you know, the first hour is quite a slow burn. It's a couple, they meet, and the woman decides that she can't have, the man can't have other people, other influences, and she wants them all to herself. Yeah, classic femme fatale, and she'll do anything, right? She's hysterical, she's irrational, she's psychotic, I guess, is a word to describe her behavior. I think she's decently fleshed out. You know, Gene Tierney, I think, plays Ellen really well, actually. I don't know what it was. Maybe the combination of her looks mixed with kind of her affectations or just kind of her stage presence, right? You know, I think really held it together, was kind of a glue for the film. She was kind of like I was transfigured, right? Like, wow, you know, let's see what's going to happen in this movie. I don't have much experience with older films of this nature, so I can't really say how it stacks up against similar pieces, but I thought it was well done. A little kind of hammy. You know, it's hard at times for me to, and I've mentioned this before, it's hard at times for me to connect viscerally to older films sometimes. It feels almost like I'm looking through an opaque, you know, screen or something. I'm unable to truly feel the characters' motivations at times or their emotional vicissitudes, right? Like, it's difficult for me. But I think the dialogue leaves something to be desired in this movie. But then again, I've learned my lesson. You guys have edified me and explained that, you know, it is more like stage, you know, it's more akin to a stage play, you know, back in the 40s and 30s. And that's just kind of how people talked. It was less naturalistic on film, that is. And so that's okay, I guess, to contextualize it. Did I enjoy it? I certainly did. I would say I kind of did enjoy it. It doesn't mean I didn't have qualms, but I think, yeah, you know, it's hard to kind of assemble my thoughts cogently, but I'm interested to hear what Tony will say. I will just say one thing that kind of annoyed me is this film had some real issues with I don't know what it would be, continuity. So who's that left to?
You're talking about the editing, or are you talking about like
no, not editing, but like
talking about continuity? You're generally talking about like a glass moves across the table. Are you talking about the storytelling, like the progression of the story, or
no? I'm see, for editing, that to me that means like in post, but it's like how it was shot. Like, it doesn't make sense. Some parts, like for instance, someone's looking somewhere, and then it just doesn't make sense with the kind of the like geometry of it. Doesn't make sense. The eye lines don't make sense. There's a part in the film that's just really kind of mind blowing. It's like late at night, and he's like, I'm going to go look for Ellen, the main character. And all of a sudden it's like 3 p.m. or something. And then they get back and it's nighttime.
Oh,
that was like
it's supposed to be night. Yeah.
Shot during the day, but they just stopped down the camera. They used to think that like that would make a scene look like it's nighttime. We'll just lower it 1 f-stop and then it'll but it's always very obvious. Yes.
Oh, I see. So is that a common convention in older films?
A lot of movies do that. Yeah.
That's weird. Okay, so you can hear I'm such a layman that I'm critiquing something that is a norm, but regardless, it's a fun little film. I think the court scene at the end was quite unnecessary.
Yeah.
I don't really understand it. It wasn't realistic at all. It was just very stupid. It was like an inquisition more than a trial, but good on Anthony. Good choice. I'm glad I saw it. So go ahead, Tony.
Well, whenever Kirk starts with it was fun, it was cute, but I had some qualms. He's a loose cannon ready to burst as we go forward. But no, I think you raised some interesting points. But let's go to Tony then.
Well, I don't want to raise your expectations too high with my notes, because one of my notes was literally hubba hubba, and we see Helen for the first time. So these weren't the most.
Thanks for that, Tony. Glad you shared that with us.
I'm just explaining. I'm explaining my notes here. I think that's important. I think that's important to the movie.
Just know,
as I
Jean Tierney's 100 years old, or she would be if she were still alive. So just know that.
Okay, no, yeah. So my response was kind of wasn't too far afield from Connor's or Kirk's. I think I enjoyed this movie more on, Connor said, a literary level, and that's kind of the level I appreciated it on. I think there's a lot of things in the movie to kind of pull at, and they're fun to think about and talk about, and I can definitely see why Anthony would gravitate towards this movie or want to show it to us and talk about it. On the visceral level, I wasn't compelled that much. I wasn't thrilled or shocked or oh my god, where's this going, the way for instance Double Indemnity, for instance. To me, that's a very viscerally satisfying movie and a propulsive, exciting narrative. This movie's not really. It's a lot much more slower pace. It's a lot more kind of lethargic. It's a lot more just kind of sits with the characters. I mean, I was never bored exactly, though. It was more just kind of okay, and kind of appreciating it in a more detached way. It didn't hit me in my gut the way I like a movie to hit me in my gut. But I definitely appreciated the way the movie kind of plays with kind of the expectations and the gender roles of the time, and just the fact, for instance, one scene I particularly liked is when they're at, what's the name of the cabin? The other side of the moon, back of the moon.
Back of the moon.
Dark Side of the Moon, Pink Floyd.
They're blasting Pink Floyd. They're doing acid.
They have the poster in the background.
Exactly.
Well, what if we played that album and watched the movie? Oh my god.
Sorry. That's what they wanted. That's what Stahl wanted. No,
Connor, that is a Reddit-worthy post. Go ahead. Tell me.
So the scene at Back of the Moon, and we see them, sleeping, and as you would expect for the time, they are married couples sleeping in separate beds. But Ellen wakes up and she gets in his bed. So it's almost it's almost like a meta moment. It's almost like she's saying fuck this. I don't want to be in this circumscribed role. I don't want to be this kind of sexless, sweet, innocent housewife. I want to be, a woman. I want to be this full human being. I want to be entitled to the agency and the autonomy the man is in this kind of movie. And that's what her character kind of does, and I thought it was.
And then we hear the brother next door say, "Good morning, Dick."
Yes. It was funny. His name is Danny, and he's literally the same character as Danny in The Room. It's the same guy. He's always interrupting them having sex and just being really cheerful, and he's there to be helped. But yeah, I love Danny. I love when he dies. That's the best part. Anyway, no, the way she kind of throws aside her role and just sort of seizes, because she really is the central character of the movie. She's the protagonist in any sense. She's not just a damsel. She's not just a side character. She's not there to tell us something about our male lead. No, she is the main character. This is her story, and we're following her, and she has the arc, she has the progression. And it's funny to see her compared to Richard, who's kind of this oblivious, pretty much asexual kind of dweeb. He's got this gorgeous woman throwing herself at him, and he's oh, that's nice. Want to hang out with my disabled brother? And she's just and it's just she's just god damn it, I just want to fuck my dad. Just because that's what obviously she's attracted to him, because he resembles her father. It's very, as we say, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of psychology here. So the one thing that couldn't quite wrap my head around, or whether it was intentional or not, is the uncanny resemblance between Ellen and her sister / cousin. Also, the fact that she was a sister / cousin. Is that a way of kind of tying these two characters together? Because, of course, Richard goes to Ruth at the end of the movie, and he wants to be with Ruth in the same way that, and maybe this is the connection, the same way that Helen wants to be with Richard because he looks like her father. There's this idea of returning back to this source of trauma, the source of pain, the source of something that wasn't resolved in your past, and kind of trying in this futile way to get back there. There's a line in the movie, I think, about like, we need to get back to the back of the moon, or you need to go back to the cabin, and maybe you can recapture the magic of the first month of your marriage. But she knows it's been ruined because that's where Danny died. So it's lost. So it's the whole exercise is futile, as we see by the failure of this marriage. And I think it leaves the movie on kind of an ominous note, despite the fact that it's like a happy ending. Why should this go any better? Because, you know, Richard's just trying to do the same thing that his now dead wife was trying to do. I had more things, but that was kind of the extent of it. So I think there's a lot to appreciate in this movie. I liked some of the thematic things, I like the way it played with some of these ideas. On the visceral, like, excitement level, it didn't do a ton for me, but certainly worth watching, as Kirk said.
Interesting. Well, I'll start and say there are implications throughout the movie, right? That the sister or the cousin brought in, right, to the family is actually her daughter. It's kind of dropped in, particularly beginning with the mom. And the way she says is, well, she's actually adopted and she's actually a much closer to Ellen than we realized. There's a few moments kind of brought in, and it's not meant to, I think, make logical sense, but I think it's meant to make a sort of symbolic sense of like this horrible relationship she had with her dad. And it's only on rewatching it a number of times that you get a number of different hints, and a number of different people have picked up on this to talk about the sort of Chinatown-like moment. So I think that's the kind of like hint that maybe oddity you're picking up.
You're saying that Ruth is Ellen and her father's daughter?
That's one way of reading that character, and it is actually a very popular like academic sort of like talk, like, and there's a lot of different clues and dialogue with the mom
was
about
Ellen
it.
6 years old when she had her? How is that possible?
Like I said, I'm not saying it's logically makes sense.
Well, she's just,
I mean, we also don't have the full age of Ellen, so you know she could have had her. You would think maybe at like
we have our
14?
eyes.
Let's assume Ruth is like 18 and Ellen is.
Yeah, I think even younger. I'd say it's 16.
It could work. It could work.
Yeah. She could have had its teenager. Anyway, let's get away from the logic because there's a lot of logical holes, of course, in the movie. But I'll start and just say, like, okay, from a background level, the kind of screenplay writer and John Stahl had two options with this movie. They had to cut one of these things in order to get past the code. One, they had to either keep the abortion sequence, or two, they had to keep the affair that's completely now cut from our finalized product in the beginning with the writer. And so what happens, of course, they cut that affair. And so we get this immediate jump from the kind of beginning of development of a relationship to their kind of marriage and her breaking away from the Vincent Price character. And I think that's a brilliant choice because what it does is, of course, it makes Ellen the central character, but it also gives us the sort of central through line of the movie, which was, here's a femme fatale, not about who, if sexuality is brought to the surface, the man crumbles. But it's a femme fatale that if it's the complete object, the complete fulfillment of man's desire, our whole world and our whole sort of societal structure of the time particularly crumbles. If you think about it in that sense of she's the perfect woman to the most extreme logical end of that time, it becomes a sort of fascinating look at the kind of complete breakdown of that sort of film noir trope. And I love calling this a film noir because it's like, on one hand, is it? On the other hand, it sort of is the movie that's brought it to the outside. But in another way, it also wants to kind of then pull back, look at the kind of male the film noir is constructed, and completely disregard it because the male itself is unimportant. It's an extremely feminine film. It's in a film about emotion. It's a film about the feminine emotion brought to the surface and brought out. If that's all out there, man cannot handle it. And I think that becomes the sort of central key of importance for us to kind of think about it because it disregards the sort of sense of logic to it. It's very fascinating. So maybe on that end, it is a sort of literary sort of film. And that's maybe why I'm really interested in it. But I think on another way, the way Tony was talking about how it didn't viscerally hit him is funny because to me, I've always had that issue with Double Indemnity. I don't know if it's because I'm more used to the genre and like the black and white, if sort of the shadowy takes kind of have been done to me more interesting in other movies. But here, the sort of use of color and the use of costume and stage design, I always find so interesting. And my favorite moment, and I can't, even though I think this like courtroom scene is kind of the big drag of the movie, the big negative to it, I think that courtroom scene and the sort of Alan's cycloptic eye from the corner watching down over everybody is just such a fascinating use. And just seeing the way the faces on everybody's like expression as the eye watches over them is so interesting. And I think
I like the courtroom scene myself.
Yeah, interesting. I've showed this movie to so many people over the years, film fans, non-film fans, casual people, and they always seem to kind of drag when it gets there. I think so. That's certainly a complaint, as much as I kind of have come to admire it over the years. But to me, this is a movie, I think it works for me completely. It works for me in the sense of looking at it against the genre and the films of its era. And it works for me on just a sort of actorial level. I think Gene Tierney's performance is one of the best performances of her sort of career here. I think it's much more superior of a film noir than like a Laura, for instance. And I love that movie. But Leave Her to Heaven is sort of one of my peak examples.
I want to pick up real quick on just what you said about the visuals, because I neglected to bring that up when I spoke. But yes, the visuals I think are very like, there's something that are very obviously like noticeable when you watch the movie, just the Technicolor images. And I like in particular, the indoor scenes and the way they're lit and the use of light and shadow and the colors, the way they pop. There's a real like 3D quality almost. Like you almost feel like you can walk into these scenes. And there's no moment that feels really like kind of phoned in. Like you talked about the courtroom scene. I did not care for the courtroom scene. Maybe that makes me basic and unsophisticated, but yeah, like I really was ready for the movie to be over at that point. But like even in that scene, like it looks great. Like just the way the green wallpaper and the way they have the rows of people, it's just great images beginning to end. And I think that they really draw you in. And I feel like, yeah, if this movie were in black and white, it would not have the same effect. It would not be as intoxicating. And I think to me, that's the closest it comes to hitting me on that gut level, is just like wanting to enter these spaces, wanting to enter these images. The outdoor scenes aren't quite as, there's some kind of like obvious like matte paintings or whatever, but like I thought the set design was very strong. And the costumes were honestly a little much. Every single scene, Gene Tierney is wearing some new completely ostentatious outfit. Like, what is she gonna be wearing this time? There's one scene
she's
where
wearing a quilt with a red like string around it. It's just like, what
the trench coat.
Yeah, there were a few that were
kind of Napoleonic like soldier's outfit. Yeah.
Well, I disagree on that. I think the costumes are a huge part of the movie. So Tony's completely wrong. He's in error, people are angry about this.
I agree there. I just didn't like all of them.
I just want to say that, first of all, to Tony's point, I think the set design is a little gratuitous at points. I mean, it's like basically nobody's going to live with a whole, like a greenhouse or a terrarium in their fucking house. There's like in New Mexico, there's like 80 trees inside this fucking villa. It's a little bit like this person's trying to do the most, the set designer, and I think less is more at times. And that leads into my second point, which is thinking more about it. I'm distracted from how much this movie suffers from poor pacing, because it's like walking through a museum. And for old movies, it certainly is like that. You're seeing things, you're thinking, you're inside your head constantly. At least for me, you're not totally with the film. You're thinking, oh yeah, that person's probably dead right now, or oh look, he's smoking a cigarette on a train, or you're saying, oh wow, look, there's a black servant, I wonder and the set design only serves to kind of potentiate that, because you're mesmerized, where I think the first half of the movie is really lacking. And perhaps if we had seen more of the affair, as Anthony has said, perhaps we would find that relationship or that trajectory to be a little more fleshed out. But the pacing, it felt a little kind of bland in the first hour. And it wasn't like the suspense wasn't necessarily building. It just felt even like more idyllic. Like you didn't really start to feel unease, at least I didn't, until the scene with the doctor and she's talking about Danny, and that was probably 45-50 minutes into the film.
I agree with Kirk on that point.
I disagree.
Yeah. I didn't pick up on that sense of unease that Connor referenced. To me, it was more like the first half hour, 40 minutes was more for me about like just kind of wondering what this movie was even going to be about.
Yes.
There is an initial kind of like, why is he even going to this place? Like, I still don't know why he even goes to their house. Like, what his stated official reason is. But anyway, go on, Connor. Could you elaborate on what is it that made you feel that way or that drew you in those early scenes?
Well, I mean, just initially, just the eeriness and the awkwardness of how they meet, struck me. Struck me immediately. That's why I said it was this Anthony moment, because it was just very intense. It's very intense mutual staring that's addressing this kind of filmic format that we're staring, they're staring. And then this element of the kind of the authorship, that she's reading his book and that he plagiarizes the book, so she thinks, but really he's self-plagiarizing. Anyway, it's just a cool moment, right? It's food for thought. We could be kind of sidetracked by that. But I felt that, just in terms of tonally, obviously when you look just like my dad as they're sitting in this kind of dimly lit dining room, and also just the way, as he slowly walks through the house, going to try to find Ellen, and he meets the cousin, and she just kind of nods to him and says, go to her, she's outside or something. And then the mom who's like, yes, she's outside, go to her. There's something so creepy. I almost felt at first like it was this agreed upon, this was a kind of a seduction by this whole family of women, especially you get that too. You get this kind of, this very eerie scene of when she's burying her father by throwing his ashes like violently into the wilderness. Sorry, not burying, but, putting him to rest by scattering his ashes on this mountain. And she's riding very furiously. And it's kind of these like, Amazons or something, there's something very eerie, about this moment. And I think it continues, obviously when we have, Vincent Price, Anthony told me Vincent Price was this movie. I forgot. I didn't even look at the cast.
So
I apologize. I just look at the top billing. But, oh my God, he's really, obviously he's known as kind of a horror guy.
Handsome here, yeah.
Didn't necessarily have the reputation here, but I didn't recognize him because he's this kind of a handsome young man, but also kind of an eerie little creep, as well. Which is why I actually love the courtroom scene, because it's just him, like, he's just trying to honor the memory of Ellen by asking these really melodramatic questions. When did you fall in love with her? I don't know. There's something melodramatic.
Do you love her?
But kind of cool in its campy way. Anyway, but that would be my point. That would be my points, guys, for like the eerie tone. And I think none of it really pays off, though I really like Anthony's theory that he's presented, or the other theory that I had not thought of the dark history, because that makes more sense, right? Why there's kind of a reason behind why she is, I was kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop, and I was captivated in the first half of the movie for that reason, because of the eerie tone, and I felt that something was going to be revealed, and it's not. It's just, well, she's just kind of an evil person, and ultimately in the second half of the movie there's no antagonism. Basically just whatever Dick does, right? And he always does the right, good golly gosh, thing to do. And she just always reacts in the worst way possible, in a way that I don't think, in a way that only reinscribes. Like, I don't think she's supposed to be a perfect woman in that sense, right? She's supposed to be a woman who fails in the most like unrealistic way possible, because she just reacts badly to every, so to speak, nice thing that the man does. And the movie doesn't seem to recognize any humanity in that. It treats it as pure evil, right?
Interesting. I think I agree with you about the sort of feeling of unease, the sort of haunting sort of quality, especially the opening moments. We get kind of three major scenes that really clue us in. Not just that awkward talk, but the one is, the way she's talking about the father is definitely a big part of it. We get the sort of Vincent Price relationship, and then we get the third, and I think the most important part, which is something that not just the sister, but the mom especially repeats, which is she just loves too much. And that phrase comes up quite a few times, and it becomes this interesting moment, or this interesting saying about what exactly do we mean here by love, and what exactly do we mean by a woman who should be loving too much? Because it seems to be a good thing if we take it on its own part. But that becomes the sort of key, is to love too much is to then realize that it is the most selfish kind of thing you could actually sort of exhibit. And that sort of seems to be the fault, because then you realize that loving too much is selfishness, but then correct loving in the way they put it is to be sort of weirdly selfless in a way, though, that only benefits the man. in the kind of situation. But anyway, I want to get back to real quick the set design and the landscape real quick too, because I actually really love the way the film uses its outdoor spaces, the way it kind of like traces this sort of like female womb-like shapes with like the lake especially, and the way it becomes this sort of navigatable womb that they're searching through. And the way that like Tony was talking about, they have to kind of get back to, becomes this sort of interesting female image in it. But sorry, you look like you were going to say something, Tony.
No, you guys dislodged something in this talk about like love and marriage and the idea of loving too much, because I think that's another kind of, I think, astute critique or like social critique the movie's making, right? Like we can criticize this character, right, as being this like just evil woman, right? And I suppose that's true as far as the movie goes, right? I don't think that's wrong, but I think one thing kind of on the movie's mind that makes me not really hold it against it is I think that a lot of the problems that arise in this marriage and in this relationship come out of like what the expectations for relationships are at this time, because basically what it boils down to is a lack of communication. What she wants is to spend time with her husband one-on-one, which is a normal thing to want. Husband to spend time one-on-one, but she can't just say that to him, so she has to like let his brother die, you know what I mean? It's like a really dramatic over the top thing, but it reflects the truth of like, if you don't like address these problems and just as a human being, as equals with your partner, things are going to spiral out of control. And probably not in the way it does in this movie, but I think that is true. And that's true to this day. Right. And I think that like the gender dynamics of this time make that essentially like kind of impossible. Like she wouldn't feel comfortable having that conversation with her husband. She wouldn't be comfortable expressing like a frank, sexual interest in her husband in the way that like nowadays perhaps we would expect or want, right? And also the fact of the baby, that whole thing too, like she could just tell her husband, I don't want to have a child. I'm not ready to have a child, but they can't, because they can't have that conversation, it leads to what ends up happening. So I think that like, that is the core like tragedy of this movie, is if she wanted to love him and if he wanted to love her, it is possible. It's just that they're not equipped, and maybe they're just tragically by accident of history, there is no way for them to connect in that way.
And the things he does for her are always a step wrong, of the sort of setting up of the nursery. He doesn't tell her that he's changing the father's room, if you want to take it on your level. He brings her family over despite never bringing it up to her. Yeah. And it's the last thing she wants. Her whole point was to get away from family. And it's the fact that she can't get away from family that then kicks off her whole murderous spree, if you want to call it, or sort of evil spree, right? Sorry, Kirk.
No, I think, Tony, you're being a little too generous to the character and saying that and I'm a social worker, so the idea of ascribing problems to the inner self or to the individual is kind of anathema. But I think in this situation, the movie most explicitly pathologizes her. I don't think this is a result of poor communication. I mean, we're meant to understand that she killed her father the same type of way, and that she'll continue to do it until her last dying breath. I think, she's just, this is her character. I agree that in less extreme situations, the idea of communication, perhaps, I guess this is like a more dramatic example of the perils of poor communication or poor relationship role dynamics, relationship management. There's something there, but I think in this movie, she very explicitly is like sick. And to me, and I guess it depends on how deep you want to go. How many orders deep do we go where we're trying to understand what the movie's trying to portray to us? But to me, like, especially if I were living in 1946, what would I come out of this movie thinking? And I think I would come out saying, well, almost like a Reefer Madness-esque, these are the dangers of a woman's unfettered desires, right? Like this is what happens. This is what happens when a woman is allowed free reign to kind of dictate the wills of her relationship or dictate the trajectory of her love and her relationships. And to me, that's what it is, like a woman who has so much agency and squanders it and uses it for kind of nefarious means. So to me, I think the movie's almost kind of regressive in that sense. And I disagree with what you said earlier, Anthony, about how it places the blame on the male for not being able to handle the woman's love. I agree with what Connor said, by saying that we aren't really shown that. We're shown more the kind of foibles or mistakes that she makes rather than the ones that he does himself. Cornell Wilde, I don't necessarily see his character as being like emotionally unavailable, or I don't know, I guess to an extent. But to me, I guess to summarize, I think that the character of Ellen is pathological narcissist, borderline tendencies, histrionic personality disorder, whatever you want to label it. And the point that I think the movie's trying to convey to me, and of course this is subjective, but is that a woman's desire is to consume the man, and the man needs to create appropriate boundaries so that cannibalization cannot take place. And Anthony, I know you're going to say that's the exact opposite of what the movie is trying to say to me, but go ahead. That's just my
Amen, Kirk. Amen.
I just want to say, I just want the record straight here. Okay, guys, we have a woman who knows what she wants and doesn't apologize for it. And Kirk's like, oh, she's a monster. She's a murderer. Oh, and I'm like, wow. I think that says a lot more about you than it does about the movie. And that's all I'm going to say about that.
Interesting. No, I mean, I've talked a bit. I could go more once we get to voting. So, but we'll get some final thoughts in a second. And yeah, no, I'm sympathetic towards your position, Kirk. I still would defend mine in the sense of one, I think one thing we really have to think about, of course, is the perspective, and the way the female perspective lasts even after death in this particular movie, in that courtroom scene, is particularly interesting because the man does suffer, even if it's not fully explicitly laid out by the end of the film. He goes to jail for 2 years as an accessory to her death, while Ruth gets off or is acquitted. And I think that's such a fascinating choice because it's really the moment that bookends the film, which is man's exercise into jail for his inability to reconcile the way the murder was actually happened. It becomes then a kind of way that the female space has then infiltrated this sort of legal jargon, which should be inherently male, based on the way society has sort of structured things and based on the presentation we get. Look at Vincent Price's sort of presentation. He's the politician brought in to prosecute something which is not only completely ridiculous, but his presentation eventually has to default to the melodrama of the sort of female space to even get that sort of acquittal and to indict male by the end of the movie. And of course, as Connor was alluding to in the beginning with the sort of sinister way that women are presented, but here, the women all get away with it at the same time, right? Even though Ellen dies, Ruth gets off despite the attempt to indict her. The mom is kind of just let loose from the film's perspective, and interesting sort of things. But I'll stop there and I'll just say one thing we haven't talked about is, of course, the most insidious moment in the movie is the book dedication, and he devotes it to the girl with the hoe. So, of course, who's the girl? It's implied to be Ruth. Who's the hoe? It's implied to be Alan. And I think that is itself a very telling moment of who this guy is. But, we'll go around and get some final thoughts. Sorry, Connor?
Now, explain that plot point, why he has to go to jail, right? Mm-hmm. Ellen's intent was to pin a murder, right? She committed suicide by killing herself she took arsenic in her sugar. She's trying to pin the murder on Ruth, thereby destroying, I guess, well, what's the idea? It's because she suspects, right, that Dick would find happiness with Ruth after all, right? And she wants to sabotage that because she only wants him for herself.
To think about her, yeah.
Right. So now the plot point is that because, I guess, that Dick is considered an accessory to the murder because he didn't say that, because he knew that Ellen killed herself and he didn't say that. So that makes him an accessory to murder. Anyway, I know.
He knew about the quote unquote other murders, right?
Yeah.
And he didn't tell anybody. So he was an accessory after the fact, basically, which I don't think is true. I don't think that's how that
after like 2 years, right? Okay.
We got a legal expert.
I'm sorry to quibble, but I felt that was weak. It was disappointing to find that that's why he went to jail, right? Whereas you think, well, I guess 2 years, you would get 2 years for killing your wife, but I thought maybe it was like manslaughter.
Back in the good old days, you would, Connor.
If she's evil or something, I don't know. But anyway.
Let's vote. I'm curious to hear where this is. I actually have no idea how this is going to go.
All right. Well, do you want to go first, Kirk?
I guess I'll go first. Yeah, I'll just say this film is extremely nostalgic for a reason. I don't even know what that reason is. Obviously, I wasn't alive, getting into kind of hauntological reasons, I guess. But I appreciate your description there, Anthony, your illustration of kind of how they infiltrate the women's space and they kind of mismanage it, and it's at the fault of the men and I guess that's synonymous with who has the agency in the film. So I can appreciate that. But yeah, how about this fan theory? Ellen was trying to kill Ruth. She switched out the bath salts for arsenic. Ruth found out and actually killed Ellen. How about that?
Whoa.
Pretty cool.
Well, our live chat is exploding at the moment, so.
No, because I didn't understand. I thought, was I alone when I thought that when he entered the bedroom, it was going to be Ruth on the bed and Ellen comforting her? I thought Ruth was dying.
Which was which in that scene? I literally wasn't sure who was in the bed.
It just doesn't make sense to me why she would kill herself. It seems like she would be the third most likely person to kill in that scenario. She'd kill Ruth first, him second, and her third. So I didn't understand that necessarily, but it was a nice twist nonetheless. I guess it's kind of, there's romantic implications and stuff. But
not all movies are downfall, Kirk. Not nothing. Oh, not everything ends in a love, murder, suicide.
She said right before she died, she said, "Tomorrow millions will curse my name, but it is what it is." And then she took the arsenic. I think I will vote yes. Just because I'm a fucking sucker. I'm such a sucker, man. If this film was made in like 1987, I would have voted no. So you're lucky. You're lucky, Anthony. It's a yes from me.
That was the classic "What's Kirk gonna do?"
Classic.
I didn't know. It was as haunting and suspenseful as who's Alan gonna kill next. So, all right, Tony.
Let's a coin or
let's see, Tony. Is this movie as good as Mishima, or what do you think?
Oh no, not as good as Mishima. Come on, man. It's a great movie. No, I mean, I don't know. I was going back and forth. I'm gonna give it a soft yes. I'm gonna give it a soft yes because I think these things are interesting, and I think there is a lot in this movie. And one last thing I enjoyed the whole third act. Like, I didn't like the trial itself, but I do love that, like, this character's like dedication to stirring up drama, that she literally will kill herself just to make things difficult for other people. Like, that's a commitment to drama that I frankly envy and hope to do myself one day. So I gotta give it.
The scary thing is there'd be such a small window of opportunity to do that. Yeah, you'd have to really know your opportunity, and it'd be like you'd second guess it. You can only do it once.
I think I missed a few already, but I'm hoping there'll be another soon.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll have something to do with this podcast. But just be careful. Whatever you're doing, Tony, be careful. Okay.
We'll all like turn our 706 mugs and like Tony's face.
Guys, I just want the audience to know I am not depressed, and I would never kill myself. So if I die, it wasn't a suicide.
Okay. Tough. I was being a little bit harsh based on a visceral reaction to the movie. Anthony made good points intellectually in its favor, and there's much more to unpack, I'm sure. You know, I do think that it's an uninteresting. There are definitely other films and other stories, right, where we have a woman, right, who goes off the rails or becomes kind of evil for reasons that are explained, you know, by reference to society, right? I think that will be any femme fatale, right? Often will reflect some of those issues. Maybe not like in the noir tradition or what have you, but like think of, you know, I refer you to Euripides' Medea, right? Where that too has such like a complexity, and it's a willingness to like put everything on the table to address all these things. And in that, clearly there's some element of culpability from the rest of the society and all these things, right? I just think that that's a more compelling and that's a much more effective way of telling this kind of story or trying to get these ideas out there. Not that there's not some interesting ideas here.
Hello, Connor. We both voted yes, so it doesn't really matter.
Oh, it really matters.
Okay,
symbolic
it'll be a soft no for me. It'll be a soft no.
Well, once again, my movies do not live up to Japanese war dramas or Greek plays for Connor, so
they're good enough.
Yeah.
It was
They're good
obligatory. I
enough.
have to start doing this more. I have to try to
Yeah.
just shove
Yeah.
it into everything.
Yeah, it's some good points from everybody, but it's in, reluctantly, I think, from maybe not reluctantly, maybe softly, I guess, from 2 people, but it's in. It's number 30. I don't know what number we're at.
Anthony, I'm sorry to interrupt. We actually have breaking news. I was not observed within 6 feet when I cast my vote, so it actually remains 1-1.
Guys, we need to keep counting the votes for Leave Her to Heaven. Keep counting the votes. All right, there's more.
But
9 more ballots.
Recount for Simon Killer.
I saw on Facebook people throwing out a bunch of no votes for Leave Her to Heaven. Just a huge trough of them, just throwing them in the fire. So,
yeah,
exactly.
It's not certified yet. So, if you're listening to this, we're in the courts. I'll tell you that.
If you're a member of the 706 Electoral College, do your constitutional duty and vote no. I'm calling on you.
All right, guys. Well, despite Kirk and Tony's protestations, our Leave Her to Heaven shirts are available. Let's go on to the fan favorite section.
They're extremely sexist. Don't buy them.
Fan favorite section of
it says leave her to heaven. I'll leave her to hell. It's like they're all like puns.
They've already
really bad.
Poorly
been
constructed puns. Yeah.
All right. Final section. Let's see what everybody has. I'm waiting to see if Kirk renominates Origins.
Simon Killer. I hardly know her.
Oh man. Oh god, that's a bonus bit we'll do another time. Tony, who goes first?
I'm gonna go last this time. Let's do Kurt, Connor, me.
Fucking A. I don't know, man. Should I renominate Origins? No.
Who cares?
No.
Mishima?
Yeah, I was thinking Mishima. The next time Tony's nominated, I'm nominating Mishima, by the way.
Okay, sure.
Let me think here. What's a good, funny movie to watch? Kid songs? No, I don't know. How about The Perfect Storm? Mark Wahlberg, George Clooney, roughly 2003 era. The best score, James Horner. This score will blow your mind. It's about a little fishing town called Gloucester, Massachusetts. That was bad. Anyways, what do they fish? They fish swordfish, and a big storm's coming. It's based on a true story, so I shouldn't be so lighthearted. But yeah, big storm's coming. We got to decide between letting our swordfish rot below decks or pushing through the storm and getting the payday of our lives. And Diane Lane's in it. I think Diane Lane strictly is a better version of Marissa Tomei. I'm just going to say that out here. Anyways,
horrible thing to say.
Yeah, it's awful.
As an actor, not as a person.
Wow.
Anyways,
Marissa Tomei, he didn't mean it.
Those criticisms of Leave Her to Heaven are really coming out now.
No, it's just yeah. Anyways,
right.
That's my choice. Best soundtrack ever.
All right, interesting. So Kirk really did his homework for that movie. Let's get to Connor next, I guess.
All right, so due to a little scheduling issue, Kirk having some social or family obligations, we weren't able to record the podcast on the 5th of November last week, but I did have a little suggestion plan for the 5th of November. Any guesses?
V for vagina?
Remember the film V for Vendetta. It has great writing and plot.
So that's your pitch? Okay. Kirk, why haven't you pitched The Departed yet? I know you want to pitch The Departed, and have you forgotten about The Departed?
You know what, Tony? I know you think I'm this like facile infant
I like The Departed.
can't grasp cinema, but fuck you. All right, pitch your K-pop biopic right now. Go ahead. This is a movie about K-pop singers who get raped in the ass by ostriches. Go ahead.
Not too far off this week, to be honest. No. So I don't know why. The last movie I did was Book of Henry, and for some reason I just want to get yelled at again. I'm just back in my heel mode or whatever. But I want to do. I pitched it once before, I feel like we got to do Spring Breakers. I feel like we got to do a Spring Breakers episode, even if you guys hate it. I just feel like it fits our oeuvre. It fits the 706 continuity. Like, if someone were looking at the list of movies we've done, they'd be like, why haven't they done Spring Breakers? That fits right in. I sincerely believe that. And I just think,
hashtag not my oeuvre, man. Hashtag not my oeuvre.
I feel like we need to get our opinions on Spring Breakers out into the world. I think it's just, and it came out like 7 years ago now or something. It came out a while back. So I think it's time to like revisit it. I feel like it's time we go back and like say, what was Spring Breakers? Why does it exist? What does it mean? What does it say? Is it still relevant? Was it ever relevant? I think that could be a very fruitful discussion.
Interesting. I got a sort of Kirk feeling right here where I just want to take all the movies and throw them out and get some new ones. But
I gave you a throwaway.
I'm kidding.
I'm worried. I'm concerned. I don't want to bring out the big guns, but let me just say that I've seen High School Musical was one of my favorite trilogies, and I believe that for you to pitch something as disquieting as Spring Breakers, as kind of disgusting and depraved as Spring Breakers, when we know she's a wholesome girl that went to East High and she's now on a scholarship at Stanford. So I don't know what you're talking about, Tony. Anyways, what's the actress's name? What's her name?
Vanessa Hudgens?
Yes.
No, it's Vanessa Hudgens isn't in Spring Breakers, right?
Yes, she is.
She is?
Yes.
No, it's Selena Gomez
as well.
I thought Vanessa
Both of them.
both are.
Oh, is Vanessa? I don't remember.
No, they're both.
Gee, Anthony.
I don't remember.
Can there only
these
be
things.
one talented actress in their 20s? No, I haven't seen Spring Breakers, so
You haven't seen it, really?
It looks kind of like
Oh my god!
like pseudo blackface for James Franco or something.
Guys, if Kirk hasn't watched Spring Break, we need to get the raw Kirk Spring Breakers. We need that. We need that in our.
I can't say it wouldn't be a good thing for the podcast.
We need.
All right, well, fair enough. And then what was the other one? What was Connor's? Oh, V for Vendetta. I saw it like literally 15 years ago. What year did it come out?
2006.
Okay, 14 years ago I saw it. And kind of was unimpressed, but it might be fun. I don't know if we've done a Natalie Portman film. Have we?
I don't think so.
I believe so.
It'd be
Someone
nice to talk
suggested
about her
Leon
career.
the Professional. I think you suggested Leon, but we never did it.
No, yeah.
I think someone else suggested Heat as well, and we didn't
I
do
suggested
that.
Heat. That's right. We didn't do that. Yeah.
But yeah, that might be fun. And also to talk about kind of the cultural significance, where it's come and how it's been bastardized and all that. So, but yeah, if you want a great movie, The Perfect Storm, it's got a brilliant love story. It's like really, really touching, and a lot of memes, a lot of great actors, a lot of bros, hanging out on the
Oh,
boat.
we talking memes? You think nothing's beating Spring Breakers for the memes, my friend?
All right, fair enough.
So, guys, I have to finish the poem. I forgot the second stanza of the poem. Okay.
Is this the Monkey Shines poem?
Remember the film V for Vendetta. It has great writing and plot. I can think of no reason why the film V for Vendetta should ever be forgot. Because, guys, this is like one of the most socially impactful movies. Like, what other movie from the past 20 years is like referenced, has as much currency, is as vital and significant, right, as V for Vendetta, which imagines this, right, dystopian future, right, a kind of fascist future, right? Obviously, things have changed since then. The culture has changed. These signifiers, what it represents, right, still remains, obviously through many layers of refraction and irony. But I think it's an important moment to return to V for Vendetta and give it a good hard look as a film.
Interesting.
I think Connor makes a very good argument for V for Vendetta. I would not be opposed to doing that, but I maintain that everything I've said, we just got to do it. Sooner or later, we got to do it. Whether or not it's this week, it needs to happen. We need to do an episode on Spring Breakers, guys.
All right. Some interesting arguments, rebuttals. So here's the thing. All these movies right now are equal in my mind because Kirk lost me. Kirk lost me at Mark Wahlberg. He almost reeled me in with Diane Lane. But
And then he lost
I
me
just-
again when he said he's better than Marissa Tomei.
I love
Then
that
he
pun,
lost
by
me
the
again.
way.
He threw
That
me
was a
back in
great
the
pun.
threw me back in the ocean with the whatever. But okay, so Tony's movie I saw was that freshman year when it came out, and I feel like that was the perfect age to see it. That was the age when you're an 18, 19-year-old guy. For us, you're in that young feeling of spring break, which is when I saw it, and I just was like, oh, it's gonna be the cool edgy movie I'm gonna love, and I just hated it. And I feel like I've hated it since, but maybe now I'd see something to it. And is it worth making Kirk watch that movie just for our amusement? I don't know. I don't know if it is.
It wouldn't be just to like subject Kirk to it.
Okay, well, I feel like it's more about the Kirk part.
It'll
So
be
that's
mostly about that.
Yeah.
Mostly about it for me.
Wait, is it? Wasn't it like critically acclaimed, or is it just really horrible?
Don't tell him anything about it. Don't tell him anything about it.
It's like very garish.
You don't get to know anything about it.
Something like that, Kirk. Yes.
yeah, internet favorability, I think. But okay, so
It's a
Connor's
Tony movie.
movie.
It's a Tony movie. I'll say that much. It's something
All
that's
right.
funny.
All right, Connor's movie. Connor makes a very good point. It's V for Vendetta. It's maybe The Hunger Games Part 2 as the most culturally relevant movies of all time. And
Hunger Games Part 2 is going to take. I'm working on that. That's going to take a while to become so culturally influential. But yeah.
yes, I think it's true in a sense, right? It's the ideology or the ideas of V for Vendetta have definitely infected, if not the film or its actual messages themselves. Okay, this is the hard part. I got a penny over there, and I want to flip it. But instead, I'm going to go with Tony.
All right.
I'm going to do this.
I knew it. I knew it was
I'm going to do this because I'm going to revisit it, and I'm going to hope for something better than what I remember. And if anything else, I know Kirk and I will hopefully be on the same side.
See,
All
I
right,
mean,
well-
if nothing else, we'll get a discussion out of it. I feel like there's a lot to chew on.
Well, I
You
think there's
suggested
something.
it once before, I think.
Yeah,
Tony, right?
Am I meant to hate this
I'm
movie?
sure
or
we've
what?
discussed it, but
I think you're
You
more
suggested-
likely going to
I
dislike
suggested
it,
that
Kirk.
years ago.
But I mean, I don't know. I think it's important also to revisit movies more. So that's
I think
my
it's the
key rule.
perfect thing. It's the perfect time span to revisit it because it came out like a while back now.
8 years ago,
kind of a
right? 7
thing-
years ago.
Yeah, and it was kind of a mild phenomenon when it came out. So I think it'd be interesting to do that for that reason. And I haven't watched it in a long time. All right,
It'd
guys.
certainly be interesting. But now you guys are going to have to deal with my anonymous army coming after you. We are legion.
Yes. I'm already kind of wishing I picked
Late
Connor's
Pepe.
pick. but-
You know, that kind of stuff.
Connor's pick
For
was a
those
little
of you at
too in
home-
my wheelhouse.
He
Sure.
put the mask on right away, right before he announced it. He's been wearing it still. I think he might just keep it
I
on.
got my Spring Breakers outfit under my shirt, so I was ready to.
The bikini, yeah,
No, I'll be dressed as James Franco next week. So
sure.
Anthony, send us home.
All right, I'll have what she's having.